Hi, students. I'll be talking about Bob Ben's article, The Big Questions of Public Management. Now, this article was published in Public Administration Review, PAR, which is considered the platinum standard in academia and public administration. This article, to give you an idea, I believe PAR may only have like a 5% type of acceptance policy for their articles. Your professor is nowhere near the level of researcher as Dr. Ben at Duke University, and I think now he's actually at Harvard University, last I checked about him. But I can assure you that this article is very, very fundamental to understanding and really appreciating the issues and theories in public administration. So, Bob Ben discusses the three big questions that he talks about in public management. The micromanagement question. Micromanagement question asks how public managers can break the micromanagement cycle or procedural rules, which prevent public agencies from producing results, which leads to more procedural rules, which of course predictably leads to probably not very good results, which leads to more procedural rules, which predictably is a cycle. Number two is the motivation question. How do public managers motivate people to be able to work energetically and intelligently and forthright for serving public purposes? In order to basically be a better public administrator, you probably should be able to understand how to assist your citizens. The last part is about the measurement question, and the measurement question is also very important because it allows us to figure out whether or not public agencies, public managers, public administrators such as myself, and obviously some students probably in the future, how these individuals can measure the achievement of their agencies in terms of success or possibly failure. Right now in DC, we're on day 36 of a government shutdown in 2025 under the second President Trump administration. And as students may recall, in early 2025, Doge came in and tried to cut a lot of jobs and cut departments. Department of Education basically has become a shell of itself. Now, this is not a political discussion in what I'm saying, but what I'm saying to you is that many times a lot of things that is discussed in public administration eventually become politicized. They become very political in the sense. There was a long time thinking that in DC, these administrators, these public bureaucrats, they're sort of like these fat cats. They don't really do any work, or they are considered like leftist loonies, as some people might have said, possibly on Fox News, other news sources of right wing. And they're not really doing any good work, or they're not really doing anything that is productive or successful. But how do you measure success exactly in a government or a nonprofit? I think a lot of students understand this, that it's very difficult to do that actually. An easy example I can tell you is at TSU. At TSU, for example, we have 2,000 graduates each year that I've understood at the undergraduate and the graduate level. 2,000 students are graduating each year from the law school, the pharmacy school, the various undergraduate programs. Is 2,000 for a school the size of maybe 9,000 students? Is that considered a good success rate? I actually don't know the answer. I really don't know the answer. But what I can say is there's a lot of people who are very interested in that. And that's why we have graduation rates that are published throughout the state of Texas and the United States. Does that mean that one school is more successful than another in graduation rates? Well, if you only look at the graduation rates, sure, that's possibly true. I believe, has a 53% or 54% graduation rate. UT Austin, which is the flagship university, they might have 60% possibly. So, in a 6-year period of time, that seems pretty good for undergraduates. But is that something that's successful or not? I don't know. I mean, I understand UT Austin now might only take 8 or 9% of students. So you really are the best of the best that Texas can produce. But yet somehow UT Austin might only have a 60% graduation rate in 6 years. That seems a little bit low. Again, how do I know these things? I'm not an education professor. But I look at things like this as statistics and figure out whether or not this is something that is worth it. And how do you figure that out exactly? So Bob Ben did something that other professors, academics like myself, the policy eggheads, he asked questions. That's actually what the whole article is really about. How do you ask these big questions in public administration? He gives example, for example, in physics. Nobel Prize winner Steven Weinberg in 1993 wrote, "The theory of the formation of galaxies is one of the great outstanding problems of astrophysics. The formation of galaxies provides one of the thorniest problems in cosmology," which was Michael Rowan Robinson in 1977. "Despite intensive work, no solution has been produced, which does not amount to saying a galaxy forms because the initial conditions of the universe preordained that it would. Physicists all know that these big questions are what alternative answers exist, how different people are attempting to sort out these alternatives, to create new alternatives and to answer the questions." But in academia, in public administration, there's really nothing like that we seem to have. Paleontology, that's another good example he talks about, which are paleontology, for those of you who enjoyed the Jurassic Park series, which I also happen to enjoy. That's all they talk about, dinosaurs. Why did the dinosaurs die out? The biggest mystery of all. Was it an asteroid? Did a bunch of aliens come down and go dinosaur hunting? Was it, the Earth warmed up? There's climate change? There's all these theories out there. No one actually really knows. But that's what keeps the field exciting and the field more interesting. And that's what sort of Bob Ben discusses also. How do you keep this field exciting? How do you do that? Public administration, of course, fundamentally explores how the government should be organized and managed to fulfill its intended functions responsibly and efficiently. That's, after all, what we're looking at. The field obviously confronts big questions, such as how to balance democratic values like accountability, transparency, ethics, against the need for expert, efficient management. Because public administration, after all, is not business management. The government is very good about doing good things. It doesn't have to be very successful at doing big things or impossible things, although we have done those too, of course, like the Manhattan Project and, of course, walking on the moon. Tensions obviously persist between political control and bureaucratic autonomy, which raise questions about responsiveness to citizens versus technocratic professionalism. Now, of course, there are central questions. What is the proper role of public administrators in policy formulation and implementation, which are mere agents of elected officials or experts with a duty to shape policy outcomes? How should public administration reconcile fairness and efficiency, especially when policy goals demand both equity and effectiveness? How can bureaucracies remain accountable and avoid corruption while still being innovative and adaptable to new challenges? How do we do that exactly, where we have bureaucracies that have been accused of being very corrupted or problematic, but yet you somehow want to still have accountability? The discipline is challenged by the changing environment, globalization, technological advances, and social complexity, which are used to try to demand new models and flexible approaches. Hence, of course, what's going on right now in DC. A lot of people are very upset. They felt that things were not working out in DC properly, so we want to elect some new leaders to go to DC and fix these problems. That it remains to be seen whether that will really work or not. Right now, it doesn't seem to be like that, but it may work out in the future. We just don't know that at this time. Calls have also been made in the article. He discusses this. Dr. Ben. Calls have been made for more participatory and networked and collaborative approaches, with the ministers acting as facilitators and boundary spanners rather than actual rule enforcers. Many times students probably know this, that public bureaucracies, public bureaucrats, they become very rule bound, where it's a 9.5 by 11 or 8.5 by 11 inches paper. The document has to be turned in such a way, blah blah blah. But the reality is that you don't have to do it that way. There's ways you can bend the rules a little bit. After all, that's why government is, because government has to serve everybody. We can't pick and choose. For example, all of us pay our taxes. We pay taxes, for example, national defense. We want to have a strong, robust national defense program in case the Russians or the Chinese or the North Koreans decide to bomb us. Now, of course, if you are a homeless person on the street tonight in Houston, you're not paying taxes, but yet you have nuclear protection. If we were to attack, we would have some kind of protection for the citizen. Possibly, hopefully, that would never happen. But students understand what my point is, that you can't pick and choose in that way. Now, I want students to consider real life application cases and what's going on in DC right now in 2025. And to be truthful with you, and anytime what goes on in DC and in Austin, our state capital, is always something of interest for students to look at. Consider also when this article was written in 1995, there was no AI. I remember I was a sophomore in high school in 1995. And at that time, the internet was very slow. We had dial-up service, which some students probably may remember that it still exists to some degree, I would imagine, in rural America. But dial-up was something that was like a big deal. And to go on the internet at that time, pages would load up very slowly. I'm obviously dating myself. But of course, you have to consider, how Bob Ben, when he wrote this article in 1995, in 2025, 30 years later, how things could be very different, like considering AI. Now, in big questions, for example, thinking about this, there are often dumb luck that happens with public administrators. Sometimes, for example, there's something called serendipity. It plays a key role either in revealing a key piece of information or revealing a particularly simple solution. Sometimes, for example, scientists did not even know about some issue, something they didn't even really know about. They just stumbled upon it. They just kind of found out that this is just what it could be. So that often happens many times also. Last couple of things I did want to speak about, going back to the beginning. The field of public management, when he talked about 1995, micromanagement, which of course is how can public managers break the micromanagement cycle. Motivation, how can public managers motivate people? Public employees, those outside the formal authority of government, to work energetically and intelligently towards achieving public purpose. And of course, measurement. How can public managers measure the achievements of agencies in ways that help to increase those achievements? All of these are management questions, prescriptive questions. And so as you go forward in this program, and of course PAD 500 is a foundational course of the program, consider all those questions that Bob Ben and other theorists are going to talk about. Look at them carefully and think, how does that relate to 2025 or 2026 or 2027 or 2030 down the road? What does that relate to in terms of how this article relates to the big questions of public administration? Because your generation, I'm Generation X, they will have different values, different norms, and different answers to these problems. Until next time, thank you again.